I'm going to read it. The Prince and the Pauper, written by Mark Twain, chapter 27. In prisons. Again, the Hendon and Warren Edward the King were sent to the prisons. And okay, here you go. Cells were all crowded, so the two friends were chained in our large rooms, or burden charged with the trifling open stores commonly kept. They had company, but there were some 20 men, Necro and fettered prisoners here, of both sexes and of the varying ages, and often a noisy game. The king trapped bitterly of the stiff and indignantly thus to put upon his loyalty, but Hendon was moody and taciturn. He was too sorry to be wild. He had come home with a jubilant prodigal, aspiring to find everybody wild with joy over his return. And instead he got a kosher and a chair. The promise and the fulfillment just differ so widely that the effect was stunning that he could not decide as to whether it was the most tragic or the most grotesque that he felt much as it meant might when danced to read the list out to enjoy the lingo, industrialized by lightnings, but gradually his confused and tormenting thoughts settled down. I entered some sort of order, and then his mind centered itself upon matters. He turned her conduct over and examined it in all lights, but he could not make anything satisfactory out of it. Did she know him or didn't she know him? It was a perplexing puzzle, occupied him a long time, but he ended finally with the conviction that she didn't know him, and had repudiated and for interested reasons. He wanted to load her names with his cursed nouns, but his name so long to be sacred to him that it found it could not bring his tongue to profane it. Love in prisons, blankets about soil and terrorist conditions, Hendon and the king stood past the strong light as for a bribe that jail had punished liquor. Some of the prisoners singing of the liver and the songs fighting, shouting, and I think it was a natural consequence at last. A while after, some united man attacked a woman and nearest killed her by the beating star over the head to distant manacles before the jailers could come to the rescue. The jailer restored the peace by giving the man a sound covering about the head and shoulders, and the corrosion ceased. And after that, all had an opportunity to sleep, with no mind the annoyance of the moanings and groanings of the two wounded people. When the insurance the days and nights were of the monotonous sameness as to the events to whose raised hand and members more or less distinctly came by day, and the gazed at the impostor and the feudate and insult him and by night, corrodings and boring as went on through this systematically. Regularity, however, there was a change of instrument at last. The jailers brought in an old man and said to him, "The blind, as in these rooms and castles, the old eyes about and sees if the cows say and then which is Hendon glanced about, and experienced that pleasant sensations for the first time since he had been in the jail. He thought to himself that this is Blake Andrews, served all his life in my father's family as a good, honest soul. There's a light heart in his breast that is foremost, but not true. Now they all are liars. This man will notice me and understood denying me too, so like the rest. They all engaged around the rooms, glanced at each as the person returns and finally said, honestly, no one hears about the whole treason night as comes out of the street. It's easy. The jailer left. Here, he said, come this big animal and grand me and unfinished. The old man approached and looked at over long and earnestly, then shook his head and said, Maria, this is another hand and never was right. Our eyes are sound yet. Our throat here I'll take the service car, and the jailer finished the blow, lifting himself the tiptoe with his immediate halt at the same time, making us gurgling noise in his throat suggestive of suffocation. The old man says vindictively. Let him rest, godson. He's fair no worse than I. Had the handlings of the villain he should roast, and I'm no true man. The jailer rapped as the present hand rapped and said, give him peace of the mind, and on the man they all do it. Thorsten finds good diversion. Then he sauntered his tourist in a room and then disappeared. The old man dropped off on his knees and whispered, God be thanked. Though tourists come against my masters, I believe those were that. With 7 years of loss and here they are alive, I knew. The moment I saw the amazing hard work it was to keep our Chinese containers that seem to see down here is about to finish and they went to lose on the street. I'm all in pools and so nice to say the word. An hour ago forth and proclaimed, the accused of that be strangled for it. No, said Hampton. No, sure enough, I would ruin thee, and then yet helped but little in my cause, but I thank thee. Those helped just giving me back so much of my lost place in my kind. The old servant became very bellows to Hendon and the Kings and pointed up in several times a day and abused the former, always smuggler, not to be the location. How about this prison to bill of fare? He also furnished a columnist. Hendon reserved the dainties for a king. Without them, his majesty might have survived. But he was not able to eat the coarse, richest food provided by the jailer, and it was obvious to confine himself to visit in order to avoid suspicion. But he managed to impart a fair degree of information this time, information delivered in a low voice. So Hendon's benefit and interlarded with his insulting epithets, delivering in a loud voice for the benefit of the other hearers. So little by little, the stories of the family came out. Arthur had been there 6 years, disillusioned with the absence of news from Hendon in favor of the father's health. He believed he was going to die, and then he should see the huge episodes in life and before he passed away. But I begged hard for delay, hoping for some eyes of return. Then the letter came to which brought the news of the mice of death. The shocks of post-rate started Richard, and he believed his hand and was very amused. He had human himself on the marriage itself and begged for the obtained a month's respite. Another final story and the marriage dance took place by the best officer Richardson. It had not proved a happy one. It is about the country that shortly after some newsers and bride. At the point amongst her husband's papers that was tore up and then incomplete draft. On the paper letters then had accused him of the precipitating the marriage and social death to the way of duplicate forgery. Case of the court lady and the rest of the servants to be heard on our hands, and since the father's death, she has thrown off an old self-disguised and become the futurist master tour or who inmates depend upon his king and is amidst the bread. There was a bit of the Andrew's gossip to which the king listened to receive with lively interest. It's rumored that the king is maddest, but in charge forbear to say, I mentioned it before, he asked to speak of it. They say, His Majesty declared that the old man says the king is not mad and good man and yours to the advantage to visit this help and then which the matters the nearest concern the and then with the saddest patrol. Oh, doves let him mean saddest and was surprised at this brisk assault from such an inspector's quarter and then gave him a sign and he did not pursue his question but went on his budget. And why the king is to be buried at Windsor in a day until the 16th of the month, and the new king will be crowned at Westminster the 20th. The thing is, they most need is to find him first, materialist matters, the address of confidentialist, but all of them to answer all so shy. And the name of it an old man gone no further. When he signed from Hendon checked his remarkably during the strider of the ghost ship, sir, through the ghosts and then coronations, and with grand hopes that he competently looks in to come back, appear with the high and favored with the Lord Protector. What Lord Protector? Asked his Majesty, His Grace the Duke of Somerset. What Duke of Somerset? Marianne, there is but one Seymour and Earl of the Hartford. The King asked sharply. Since when is the Duke and Lord of Protector? Since the last day of January, and the Freedom made him so. Himself then the greatest council was half of King. As the matter started violently, the King cried as the O King, sir. O King indeed, it good marriage to what eldest boy. This we have but one. It is not difficult to answer his most sacred majesty King Edward the Sixth, to whom God preserved. Yeah, dear and English little Trinity and choose, and what is the be man is no end, they say, and daily, his praises are all the men's lips and all the breast teams likewise, and after to praise that he may be experienced to range along in England, for ye began humanist and received me all the Duke of Norfolk life, and now he bent on destroying the courts, the laws, and the heavens, and oppressed the people. His news struck. As a matter stunned with amazement, and then plunged him into a so deep and dismal others that he heard more the old man's culture. He wondered if the little assurance was the beggar, the boy who allowed to dress in his own garment in the palace. It did not seem so possible that this could be. For surely the manners and speeches would betray him. If his print hand to be the prince of ways, then he would be driven out, and the such made. For the true prince, could it be that the court had set up some sprig of the noble tone in his praise? Nor for his uncles would not allow that he was all powerful and cutest, and would crush such a movement. Of course, and the boy's musiness and profits to him nothing the more. He tried to unreaders and mistress, the more perplexed he became, and the more his heart ached, and the worse he slept. His impatience to get to London grew hours, and his captivities became almost unendurable. And then thought, out of the oldest king, he could not be comforted, but a couple of women who were chained and used him succeeded better. Under gentle ministrations, he found peace, and learned the degree of patience. He was very grateful, and came to love them dearly, and to delight in the sweet and soothing influence of their presence. He asked them why they were in prison, and then when they said they were the Baptists, he smiled and inquired, "Their crime to be shut up. This for in prison. Now I grieve, and for I shall lose ya. They will not keep the years long for such a little thing." They did not answer, and something and there which made him uneasy. He said as egoist, "We do not speak to be good to me, and tell me there will be no other punishment." Frederick tells him there is no fear of that. They tried to change the topic, but his fears were rose, and he tortured it. Well, there's the screw this, and no, they would not be so cruel. Later it would not come. The other will not will die. The women betrayed confusion and distress, and but there was no waiting to unanswered. So one of them said, in a voice choked with emotion, "Oh, there was to break our hearts." The gentle spirit. God help us to bear us. It is the confession. The king broke in. Then there was Scrooge, he and so his heart is the righteous, but all those most honored with, I can bear it. Keep up the courage. I shall come to my own in time, and to say this from this bitter thing and out of it. When the kings awoke in the mornings, the women were gone. Saved, he said joyfully. Then he added to the scoundrels to owes me, and therefore they were my comforters. Each of them had left a shred of living spin to his clothing, a token of remembrance. He said he would keep these things always, and that soon he would seek out the dearest friends of his and take them under his protection. Just then, jailers came in with some subordinate and then commanded the prisoners to be conducted to the jail yard. The king was overjoyed. It would be the best thing to see the blue sky and then breathe the fresh air once more. He fretted and chafed at the thorns of the officers. But his turn came at last, and then he was released from the statue, and the others to follow the other prisoners with attendant. The court again drank was stones and paved, and off into the sky the prisoners entered through a massive archway. The mountain that was placed in fire standing with their backs against the wall, and the loft was stretched in front of them, and they were also guarded by their officers. It was chill and rolling mornings, snows which had fallen during the night, with whitening the great empty space of added general dismanness of his aspects now and then. Snow which the wind shivers through the place, and snow was adding hither, thither, in the center of the course, strewed to chain post. I can show the king that there was his good friends. He shouted and said to himself, there was not gone free, as I had thought, to think that such as this should know the lash in England. There is same of it, and not in his England. They would be scourged, and whom then they have the comfort, the kind entreat must have gone. See the great wrong done, and then it is strange, so strange that the very source of power in this bold elements have rest to protect them. But let these miscreants look well to themselves. There is a day coming when I'll acquire them the heavy likeness for this work. For every blow they strike now, and they shall feel 100 then. A great gate swings open, and a crowd of citizens poured in, and they flocked around the truants. And he that from the king's views, a clergyman entered the path through the crowd, and he also was hearing the king's nose heard talking back and forth, as if the question were being asked and answered. He cannot make out what was said. Next there was a deal of the bustle and preparation, and much passing of the passings of shirts through the part of the crowd that stood on the further side of the room. The whilst this deep hush gradually fell upon the people. Now by command, the master forth of the far side, the king saw a spectacle that froze the marrow and bones and felt, and had been spoiled about the two women, and the man was loitering them. The woman bowed their heads like a bird as the face with their hands. The yellow flames began to climb upward among the snapping and the crackling fagot. Wrath of blue smoke streamed away of the wind. The clergyman lifted his hand and began to play. Just then, two young girls came flying through the great gate, uttering the piercing screams. Threw themselves off on the moon and sake and instance days the water away to the right off the chance. And one of them was Captain, told to lift about the other of clues and saying she would have released her mother, and before she could be stopped, and she had flung her arms about her mother's neck again. She would turn away once more and would the gun and fire till three men had her, and then the burning portion of her gun was snatched off, and then don't bring himself aside as she struggling to although wanted to free himself herself. And the thing is she could be alone and in the world, and now the begging to be allowed to die with his mother. The girl screamed and continually then approached for freedom. Suddenly this tumult was drawn up under the volley of hard piercing shrieks of motorist agony. The king glanced from the particles onto the stake, and then turned away and then leaned as I turned his face against the walls and had a look no more, he said, that which I have since in that one little moment would never go out from my memory, but it was by it there, and I shall see it all the days and dream of it all nights, till I died, because the throne gotten I had been blind. And I was watching the kings, and he said to himself then, so with the satisfaction, just all the stuff managed, and he had to change it and grow sort of gentler. If he had the followers, he's the one, and he would have a stone. At least the but he said it was king, and then commented that women turned loose and scared. As soon as his delusions would pass away to be forgotten. As reminded to behold against God and speed the days. That same days, the several prisoners, the fourth remained overnight, who were being conveyed under guard to various places in the kingdom. To negotiate punishment for the crimes committed, thus the king conversed with these. He admitted it upon the from the beginning to instruct himself for the kingly office by questioning prisoners whenever the opportunity offered them, till their oaths and wrung his heart. And one of them was a fool harping, which is the one who had thrown a yard and tore the cords, and then from the weaver was to be hanged for it. Another was a man who had been accused of stealing a horse. Had the fool had failed, he had imagined that he was saved from the halter, and that he was hard faced to be first. He was arraigned for killing a deer in the king's park. This was proved against him then, and now he was on his way to the gallows. There was a tradesman's apprentice, whose case that particularly distressed the king. The youth is found who, and one evening had escaped from his honor. I took harmed with him and imagined himself entitled to it. But the court convicted him of treason and sentenced him to death. The king was furious. These inhumanities wanted the attendant to break jail prior was seen to the Westminster, so that he could mount his throne and hold out his scripture marches over these unfortunate papers and save their lives. And poor child, St. Henry, these awful tales had brought his memories upon him again afterwards. But for this evil habit, he would have been well in a little time. Among these prisoners was an old lawyer, a man with a strong face and dangerous man. 3 years past, he had written some pamphlets against the Lord Chancellor, accusing him of injustice, and then had been punished for it by the loss of his ears and the furious and liquidations from the bar, and in addition they had been fined £3,000 and sentenced to imprisonment for life. Later he had to repeat his offense, and in consequence to now under sentenced to lose what remained of his ears, paid a fine of £5,000, divided on both cheeks, and remained in prison for life. This be amorous cursed, he said, and turned back his raised hair and showed a motivated strokes of what had once been his ears. The king's eyes burned with passion. He said, "None believe in me, neither was those, and no matter within the compass of mouth, those shall be praised, and more laws that have dishonored thee, and then shame the Englishman shall be swept from the such books. War is made laws. Kings should go to school to their own laws at times, and so learn mesh." Quite interesting story. King should go to school. King should go to school in prison.